Welcome to another edition of the Idaho House Republicans podcast, where you get to learn a little bit more about the representatives that you have sent to the State House. And today we are really glad to have on our show Representative Cornel Rasor, and he represents Legislative District 1. He sits in House Seat B. Welcome to the Idaho House Republicans podcast, Cornel Rasor.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Let me tell you a little about Cornel. He is raised in Bonner County. He was raised on a family cattle ranch. Do you still have that ranch?
No, I have a smaller part of it that we saved that my kids and I have been on.
I love that. I love that. The continuing of the legacy of that. So he graduated from Sandpoint High School. He is a local business owner. He's had an Army surplus store in Sandpoint for 43 years.
44.
44. They got to update the bio, right?
It's actually in Ponderay now.
Oh, Ponderay. Okay. And he's been in politics for 30 years, and he was once the county commissioner in Bonner County. But most importantly, Representative Rasor, you have your lovely wife, Kim, of 48 years, right?
49 this year.
You got to update that bio.
Yeah.
And you have 3 adult kids and you have 16 grandchildren. Is that the right number
That's
still?
Correct.
Okay. Anyone on the way or anything?
No, I think
okay, so we're at 16. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about your district. So you represent Legislative District 1, and tell us about where that is, and tell us about what your constituents care about issue-wise.
So Bonner County and Boundary County are our District 1. Bonner County, all of Boundary County, which is the Bonners Ferry area and borders Canada. Bonner County goes from, of course, the Boundary County border down to the Kootenai County line, minus 3 precincts. What's important up there is agriculture. People are concerned about immigration. They're concerned about the budget. And there's some of the local concerns have been bathroom privacy and security issues in churches. Interestingly enough, what most legislators do down here is they don't think up the ideas themselves. Their constituents bring it to them.
Yes, absolutely. It's a huge part of it.
So that's what I've done over the last 2 sessions, is worked on issues that my constituents brought.
That's fantastic. And that is the best representative government you can have, is it when you literally represent your constituents.
Right on.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So can you tell us why you decided to run for because you're in your 2nd term. So 4 years ago, you decided to suit up and get in the game. Tell us why you felt compelled to do so.
Well, I spent 4 years as a county commissioner, and we had some success in that. We actually were, I was a commissioner during the time that the Sacketts began their battle with the EPA. We worked on environmental issues. We had a situation where the courts required the Fish and Wildlife Service to create critical caribou habitat, and we utilized a relatively unknown federal process called coordination to prevent them from taking over 376,000 acres of Donner and Boundary County, about an area about the size of Rhode Island. We worked with Fish and Wildlife to reduce that to about 30,000 acres. Long story short, it whetted my appetite for seeing that we could have success in doing some of the things that the constituents of Bonner and Boundary County wanted. So I got unelected and went back to private life for whatever it was, 10, 15 years. And people were asking me to get involved in the state legislature. And it appeared that I might have the skills and the time at this stage of life to do that. So we prayerfully re-entered the world of politics. I've been involved with the local Republican Party since the 90s, but
yes,
it's a little bit more.
Well, thank you for your long-term service to the party. And I just had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing the Sacketts just yesterday.
Yeah, Mike and Chantel, great
and
people.
What a story of David and Goliath that is. You know, beating the EPA, going to the Supreme Court twice.
Yes.
And then reestablishing how you can engage the EPA through just having a meeting with them and talking to them, and actually defining what the waters of the United States means. Yeah, they're incredible.
Their 2 court cases, their 2 victories had implications, far-reaching implications.
Nationwide.
Yes, they did.
Go Idaho, right?
Amen.
So let's talk about what committees do you serve?
I serve on business, local government, and revenue and taxation.
You have some very good committees.
Yeah, they're enjoyable.
So let's talk about, let's pivot and talk about some of the bills that you care about and ones that you maybe even carried. So let's talk about Senate Bill 1296, which talks about specific criminal trespass in a church, and you are the one carrying it in the House, and the pro tem Anthony is carrying it in the Senate. So talk about that.
So that bill came of age when actually before the Minnesota incident, I had church security personnel contact me, and they were concerned about the interesting situation that existed, that there was no specific language in Idaho law that would protect church security teams if they were removing someone from a church for bad behavior, for disrupting a service. And interestingly enough, Idaho law needs to be specific. Recently, a bill was brought. It was, the courts declared that, well, first of all, the law stated that automobile drivers had a responsibility to exercise care with bicyclists, but they did not have that responsibility to exercise the same care with electric bicyclists.
Oh, gosh.
So that had to be put into statute. So under the same consideration, the same vein, we created the church security rule, the church security statute, which will give good cover to security personnel who have to deal with disruptive people coming into church properties.
And I think people misunderstand the First Amendment right of expression, right? So you cannot just go into a church and disrupt a church that is not a protected First Amendment.
Correct. That's called trespassing.
That's called trespassing.
Yes.
So what does your bill do in terms of, is there a difference for the first time you do this and the second time you do this? Tell people like what the penalty is for that. Yes, you may, of course, refer to any materials, especially if it's directly from the bill.
So what the bill does is it defines a new form of criminal trespass specifically for churches or houses of worship. It closes a gap in current law, making it clear that unauthorized entry with intent to intimidate, harass, or disrupt worship is a misdemeanor. Because of the rise in targeted disruptions nationwide, and even prior to that, that's why this was brought. It protects the right to freely exercise religion. It guaranteed by the First Amendment.
Amen.
Preventing malicious interference that silences worshipers and erodes community trust. So the subsection says any person who pleads guilty to or is found guilty of a violation of subsection 2B of the section the first time shall be guilty of a misdemeanor and may be sentenced to jail for a period of no more than 6 months and shall be fined in an amount no less than $500 and no more than $1,000. So it's got a proportional first-time penalty and a fine, and it provides law enforcement with clear procedures to follow.
Perfect.
Yes.
That's perfect. And thank you for bringing that. And by the way, you should know that this has actually passed the Senate 33-0-2. So that is a bipartisan success. So when do you expect that it will come to the House? What's the process in the House right now?
It's likely that it'll come up today.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
well,
it's on the reading calendar. It's on the third reading calendar.
Godspeed to you on that.
Right.
And by the way, that we've had this conversation multiple times. If you've been watching some of our other podcasts, the impact the constituents can have on actually creating laws here in Idaho is pretty profound. We'll remind you that Representative Fulcher talked about the fact that he met a constituent up north who talked about excluding taxes on overtime. And that was something that he brought to the big, beautiful bill, and it actually became nationwide law. So constituents, please, if there's a concern, these are great representatives and they want to help you solve issues that day-to-day Idahoans face. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Let's talk about House Bill 752. Another issue, you said your constituents are concerned about privacy issues. And
Correct.
752 deals with people knowingly and willingly entering restrooms. Talk about what that bill does.
So this was precipitated in Bonner County by a biological male using the women's locker room, the YMCA.
Okay.
And at the time, there was nothing that could be done because Sandpoint law allowed it. Now, that's been changed, but it's not nationwide or even statewide. So this bill criminalizes, it doesn't deal with the business, it deals with the perpetrator. It criminalizes a person of the opposite biological sex knowingly and willfully using an opposite sex designated government-owned or public restroom, changing room. So the first penalty would be a misdemeanor, not up to 1 year, and subsequent, infractions, I guess I should say, would offset a felony, would set it up as a felony.
And you got to spend up to 5 years in jail for that.
Up to 5 years in jail. The idea is, and laws have a deterrent effect and an after-the-fact effect for law enforcement to charge people for criminal actions. But this is hopeful that as people see this, it will deter what has been happening and return privacy and safety to women's restrooms and men's restrooms.
Amen. Good. That's another good bill. Tell us where that is in the process right now.
So that is on the second reading calendar and will probably come up next week.
And that's starting in the House. Obviously, that's why it's been assigned a House bill number. And is that your bill?
That's my bill.
Well done. Thank you for bringing it.
And it will be carried in the Senate by Senator Ben Taves.
You know, I want to talk philosophically. I've known you a while, and I know how intently and how seriously you take your job in any aspect of the party that you've served. And I know you're bringing the same to the State House. What's interesting is you're one of the few probably looks at the bills and actually reads all the bills. And I imagine at the first couple of weeks, you're like, wow, I don't have to read that many bills this year. We've only introduced like 15 of them. Well, here we are. We're hundreds of bills in. Talk about your philosophical approach of why you think it's important to kind of actually get into the nitty-gritty of all the bills.
So the bills are supposed to reflect eventually, as they finally are passed into law, the will of the people. The Constitution does say we the people.
Yes.
And so I represent the people. They are the sovereigns. And so I believe it's my responsibility to make certain that anything I vote on, I know exactly what I'm voting on. Mm-hmm. So that takes reading and study and investigation and questions and phone calls and the like. And so it just takes time. But the time, it depends on what you want to do with your time. I put in about a 12-hour day, and that's enough time to read the bills.
Well done. Thank you for doing that on behalf of your constituents. Let's talk about another issue that you mentioned before, which was a concern of your constituents, and that was immigration, right? So you have, as you said, you're an agricultural, rural community. So you must have to balance the realities of where we don't want illegal immigration, but the reality is that the agricultural and the dairymen do use, visas, HB1 visas to bring in workforce. And so talk about how you balance the reality of wanting to maintain the agricultural business, the dairy business, and the fact that you are concerned about illegal immigration because the state certainly is. So talk about, because you have to balance that in your district.
So our district doesn't have as much agriculture as it used to.
Okay.
For various reasons. It's more of a service-oriented and a tourism-oriented community. But when I was young, from the 60s through the mid to late 80s, I would say, there were quite a few cattle ranches and dairy farms. Those of us that are pursuing vigorously proper immigration rules do not have any problem with H-1A and legal immigrants. We have no problem with that. What we are trying to do with some of the immigration bills we're working on is to just get a count of how many are here. We would like the schools to count children that are here and what their country of origin is. We've got a bill that would require, at charging, law enforcement would simply be, they would be required to report where the people are from, where they came from. Mm-hmm. And this would give us a handle on what's actually going on. Because for one thing, Idaho is paying for medical bills, emergency bills, SNAP benefits possibly, other welfare benefits for people who are not here legally. And it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't know exactly how much because we don't have a count.
But that's your estimate.
That's an estimate.
Mm.
I believe one of the estimates I saw was $400 million. That's a significant hit to the Idaho budget. Now, we're not heartless. If someone is harmed in an accident, they're going to be taken care of. But the idea is you need to follow the rules to come here legally. And then you are welcome to get any job you want, any job you can qualify for. We have no problem. The people that I work with that are working on the immigration issues are delighted to have people from other countries. That's what this nation was founded on, was inviting the immigrants. But they need to come here properly. They need to come here legally to start with.
And what bills, other than the bill that you just mentioned, that would kind of get a sense of how many there are? What other bills are you supporting in the House?
Okay, so I don't have an eidetic memory, but I can. House Bill 700, 704, 659, which deals with 287G work, which is a cooperation between ICE and local law enforcement agencies. And then there are a couple of other bills that have to do with education that would get a proper count of students.
Let's talk about revenue and tax, because you're on the Revenue and Tax committee. What is your sense of what the taxation, we are one of the biggest states in terms of $6 billion of tax relief over the last 5 years. You're obviously part of that committee over the last 2 years when we passed our largest tax cut ever last year.
$400 million.
Yeah. So this year we have the big, beautiful bill, $155 million of tax release for 2026, $175 for 2027. But I know Idaho likes to do its own tax cuts. That's a federal tax cut that we happen to be taking advantage of. But in the long term, what kind of tax policy would you like to see in terms of property tax cuts, further income tax cuts? What's your priority as that part of that committee?
So thank you for that. So one of the things I would like to begin working on, should I be reelected, is to sunset property tax so that people who live in their homes for 30, 40, 50 years or 10 years, once it's paid off, they no longer have to rent from the government. They can actually own their property. But to do that, we have to come up with a number of offsets. Property tax accounts for about $2.1 billion of money that is sent to cities and counties.
Okay.
So that has to be replaced. But that will require us to dive into those and find out what is essential. It's the same thing with health and welfare. One of the things that we're trying to do in the health and welfare, when I was on the committee and the committee as today, is to make certain that the people who really need that relief, that help, get it, and that we get at the fraud, the double dipping, and the other things that are subtracting funds from people who desperately need those funds. So as we look at reducing the budget, we look at doing it tactically, if you will, and looking at every single individual line item. Now that takes a lot of work. I don't know how many pages there are. I think the budget book has 780 pages, but even that doesn't account for every agency's individual book.
Right.
So I went through about 10 or 11 funding bills this morning. I got here about 5:15, started going through those, and those, for the most part, looked like they were well done. There were a couple one had a $2,100 reduction.
Oh my!
Well, I know, but think about that. It was important enough to JFAC to reduce that $2,100 because it was an unnecessary expense. $2,100 in a $14 billion budget. Well, you do the math. It's a rounding error.
Right.
But it's important to do that to subject these budgets to the scrutiny.
That kind of scrutiny.
That kind of scrutiny, yes.
So in the long term, you'd like to see property tax eliminated.
I would like to see that, but as those who have been more involved with government understand, if we're going to continue to have the services that are actually needed, we're going to have to find a way to replace that.
And by the way, just for everyone's knowledge, the state has nothing to do. They collect property taxes, but they don't spend.
No, at this point they don't.
Yeah. So you are, you're trying to help from the state level to help with an issue which is a local or county issue.
Right.
But
we don't want to defund our counties and then send them a bunch of unfunded mandates. Don't want to do that.
Last topic I want to chat about is, it seems like you are very active in communicating with your constituents. And you talked about how constituents have really led your priorities here with some of the bills that you're running. How do you communicate with your constituents so that you can get a good sense of what they need and what you'd like to do legislatively?
Well, at home, they know where I work, so they come in and talk to me. They have my phone number, they have my email, and then I send out a Substack and a newsletter, and I post a session report each week on Facebook, and I send that out in my newsletter and my Substack as well. And right now, that session report stands at 16,000 words, so I never use a sentence when a paragraph will do.
That's fantastic. Well, you've really thrown yourself into making Idaho a better state, and we really do appreciate your work. And we've had the pleasure of spending some time with Representative Cornel Rasor. He represents Legislative District 1, and he's in seat B, and he's in his second term. And we do thank you for joining us on the Idaho House Republicans podcast, Representative Rasor. And before we sign off, as we always say, God bless the great state of Idaho. And again, thank you, Representative Cornel Rasor, for joining us on the Idaho House Republicans podcast.
Thank you, Victor, for having me. I appreciate it.
Sunrise on the Snake River plain, red, white, and blue in the window pane. Work boots dusty from yesterday, but we're back at it the Idaho way.